Okay, hi guys, back again. So this time what I'd like to do is to start by just unpacking the language of the assessment, so that as you're working, you can come back and watch this video and decide um, how well you are making sure that you stick to the skills that the internal is asking you to develop. So if you turn to page 2 of your booklet, the addictive behavior assessment booklet that you have, and that of course is also in our folder for the assessment, I want you to look carefully at the title of the assessment. Okay, so examine different psychological approaches used to explain a behavior. And in this case, you're looking at an addictive behavior. I'm hooked, an explanation into an addictive behavior, into addiction. Okay, so let's just talk about that word examine, because the danger here is that in your internal, you could just give us a whole lot of information about your celebrity, the addiction, the biological approach and the cognitive approach, and one other that you choose, and just put a whole lot of information on the page. Okay, and the danger there is that you do a whole lot of work, but you're not looking at the key skill that the internal is asking you to look at, and that is what will determine your achieved merit and excellence, and that is the thinking. So when we examine something, we do thinking around the material that we've been given. So what does that mean? Well, I want you to think about people who examine, okay? And one of the people that you would know well, who examines you and has done at times, is your doctor. No doubt at some point you've all been to the doctor with something. And when a doctor examines you, the doctor will ask you why you're not feeling well, what you've been feeling. They will listen to your heart. They will often ask you to put your arm out and they'll check your blood, how well your blood's pumping. They might see if you've got any rashes, okay? And they will ask a whole lot of different questions in order that they can take all these answers that you give and put them together to examine you, okay? To examine all those things about you so that they can come to a conclusion about why you might be sick. So they take lots of little details. They might take your temperature. They might listen to you cough. They might take a swab from your throat, particularly right now if they are examining you. And all of these little details are pulled together for them to decide what might be wrong. So that word examine is a really key word in what we're doing. We're not just dumping information. If you go down to the second page of your internal, you will see that that word examine appears, okay, in all three for achieved, merit, and excellence. So that is the key skill that you need to be developing in the first internal on addictive behavior. What you will notice though is that the word that changes is the word connected with whether you get a merit or an excellence. So if you can examine different psychological approaches, okay, which basically means that you can provide an explanation for at least 3 psychological approaches. You can give us the details about the psychological behavior and how it helps you understand alcoholism, drugs, shopping, etc. And you can show the differences in the way one might explain that behavior. For example, an alcoholic behavior might be explained by a biologist as a genetic defect, whereas for a behaviorist, they might explain it through peer pressure or parental experiences in the home, or stress or the rise to fame. Okay, so there might be a number of things that they might say are different. So if you can do that, that gives you an achieved. If you look, however, at the words for merit and excellence, here we have examine in depth. Okay, and with excellence, we have examine comprehensively. Other than that, the other parts of the standard are the same. So to get a merit, you need to do it in depth. To get an excellence, you need to do it comprehensively. So what does that look like? Okay, well, in the explanatory notes here, you have a little bit of help. Okay, so to examine in depth involves providing a detailed explanation of the psychological approaches used to explain a behavior. Okay, so when I said to you a biologist would explain alcoholism through the fact that there is a gene passed down, that is not detailed. That's just a little glimpse of a reason. Descriptions of psychological theories or studies from published work. So that means that you probably will have to give us the name of a scientist or somebody who was a particular theorist of that approach, and a reference to psychological theories or studies from published works. Okay, so again, you would need to come back and give us evidence, okay, of that from a case study approach. So has somebody's behavior been looked at by biologists or by behaviorists or by cognitive theorists, that you have a case study to put against your celebrity. If we look at comprehensively examine involves evaluating the selected psychological approaches used to explain a behavior. Okay, and this includes a justification of which approach is the best explanation. So this is where you would put some value on your three approaches that you're using. So you might rank them. Okay, you might say 1 is behavior. I actually think the behaviorist approach is the strongest because. Okay, 2 is biologist. I actually think the biological approach is, okay, the second most important response, and 3. Okay, so you might rank your psychological approaches to help explain a behavior. Okay, here you would need to go back to the details that you provided in your account of your celebrity and use those to justify your decisions. Okay, so justify why your celebrity developed that addiction, and talk about what you think is the best explanation. So we will have a look at an exemplar in order for you to see what this looks like. But it's really important that you do read this page, okay, and you do look at the words that you're being asked to the skill of examination and these words here, and you do look at that and how that's going to be in your particular writing. So if we go right down through all the pages that are really helpful because you can follow through what you need to do. I'll come to those in another video. Okay, and we look at pages, I think it's 30 and 31. Okay, so here you have a mark sheet from the teacher, but these are the important pages. It's 31 onwards, and you have a look at page 31 onwards in your booklet. Okay, and what you will notice is that these are from the examining body. Okay, these are evidence and judgments for achieved merit. Excellent. And again, what you will notice, okay, is that the explanation here is an explanation. Here it is in depth, and here it is comprehensively. And underneath it, you've got these details which were given in the pages we looked at before. So if you have a look at the examples, one approach that can be used to explain alcohol addiction is the biological approach. This says that addiction is due to your brain chemistry or your genetics. When people drink alcohol, there is a chemical called dopamine released in the brain. This makes people feel good and can lead them to maintain this good feeling, which could be a factor in becoming an alcoholic. So here the student has explained what the biological approach might say about alcoholism, okay? And there are specific references to chemicals, dopamine, okay, and how that is a factor, okay? But if we look here at the merit, the socio-cultural approach would explain addiction by looking at how we are influenced by society and the culture around us. Alcohol is widely available and may be glamorized by the media. Bandura's Bobo doll experiment showed that people learn by observing other people's behavior and then imitating it. So here, the student has done the same thing as we see here, okay? The student has explained the approach, okay? But what the student has added to the approach is they have added Bandura's Bobo doll experiment. So they have added a description of psychological theory or study. Okay, and they have also added Silken in 2007 studied addiction, how it is portrayed in films, found the focus is often more on the positive effect of alcohol and drugs. So they've added 2 examples. Okay, if we go now and have a look at the excellence one, so again, we've got the biological approach. One theory from this approach relates to the dopamine reward pathway. So instead of just talking about dopamine as the achieved student does, the student for excellence has actually talked about this theoretical approach, the dopamine reward pathway. This discovery, an area of the brain is involved in the addiction process, was first identified by Olds and Milner in 1954. So the student is saying, this is not just a fact, this is why it's a fact. These are the people who discovered it. This is the way that it's been put together. And there are details here of the experiment that was performed for that particular pathway of thinking. The strongest approach, so here we have in the excellence as well, the strongest approach would be the biological approach. The behaviorist approach would explain addiction as being because of reinforcements for behavior, but the biological approach goes further because it explains how these rewards happen in the brain, release of dopamine in the DRP. Behaviorism does not explain the internal processing of mind when the biological theories can. So what we see here is the student being able to evaluate, place value on one approach over another, okay, and then decide why that is the case. So these examples are really important. And obviously in your folder, I have put lots of examples for you. Okay, here's your excellence one. And you can have a look at those and see the difference between them. Okay, so I'll come back and I'll unpack some externals for you, but that is the language of the first I'm hooked internal, which I'd like you to really think about when you're writing. Okay, so more soon on what that looks like in one of our exemplars.